Welcome to the episode that people didn't think would happen, episode 11 of Bring in the Closers. Ryan Ray alongside Ben Samuels. Ben, normally it's testy between me and you on this program, and even offline, it's even probably we some people say that people play stuff up for a show. We actually downplay the disdain and the back and forth that we have on this show for the listeners. It's really, we really suffer through. But today we have an equal enemy, an enemy that I have called out multiple times on multiple shows. And I usually get the, oh, poor fella. Oh, he's so great. Oh, how could you do this? I'm talking about producer Nate. We had allegedly scheduled back-to-back interviews, which would work nice because you were going out of town in a few weeks. You're going to miss one, maybe two episodes, so we could use one of those as filler. And we didn't prep for the show because we had two interviews. I've already recorded, 3 podcasts a day. This would have been 4 and 5. So, I didn't prep anything because I had back-to-back guests. And, we only have an hour. So, but guess what happened? We don't have any guests today.
How did that happen?
Well, I think, if I understand how it works, he sent them the wrong date, essentially.
I'm not sure what to say. I have no comment, Nate. Just like Ryan said, I've been defending you for 10 episodes now. I don't know. It's not working out well. We're taking a bad path here.
I don't understand why he gets all the love and respect of the millions around the world, but he does. But if you only knew. So if today's episode is not good, if it's your first time joining us, this is not the level that Ben and I bring to this show every week. It's normally 3 to 4 hours of prep work, mountains of research and statistics. Usually I start prepping for this show when the show ends. So usually have like a week's worth of prep, but not today because we had 2 guests. And so what is there to prep for? And so
is this episode airing on April 1st, 2020?
Yes,
Are we recording this early?
Yeah, something like that. And so, anyways, so we're just going to hopefully entertain you with our quips and fun stuff because we really have nowhere to go, do we?
I mean, chances are this is going to be our best episode yet. That's just probably how it's going to go. We'll see.
That will be in 2 weeks when you're gone. But, I mean, I guess up until
Just gonna walk off set. It's gonna be a long day.
Oh man, this is Nate. Nate brings it out in us. How can I be held responsible when he has done this to us?
So I got in the car last night at about 11 p.m., about 650 miles away from Midland. Drove straight through the night to Midland because I had a commitment today at 2:30 to do a podcast with a couple of guests. And I wanted to make sure that I was here and ready to go and ever present. And I showed up to play, but we're just gonna have to see where it goes.
Yeah, I do have a couple things that have happened since the show has started in its episode 1, which has been almost 3 months ago now. It's kind of crazy. If we're on episode 11, then that's almost 3 months. Crazy how fast time flies. One thing that happened the other day was I took a pitch from a guy who I didn't really want to hear the pitch, but I kind of felt bad. He had been working me pretty hard, and I've been kind of blowing him off. And he asked me the question that we talked about. He said, do you have 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it was? And I literally had whatever the time was plus like a minute or 2. And guess what happened?
I'm sure he went over.
He went over. He went over on his pitch by about 2 minutes, which ate up all the extra time I had. And then at the end of his pitch, he then asked me some question that he wanted me to answer, which was not like a yes or no. It was like a long-winded, hey, how do we go about, something like tell about yourself or something like that. And I thought, that's. Now, I'm not saying I want to buy the product for that guy, but it's one of the things that, and I hate to almost talk like this because you kind of sound like it's almost kind of an elitist attitude, but it's one of the things that does turn off the deal process is when you're trying to do something and your person doesn't. How would you describe that? Is it not aware of time? Is it they're too excited? How would you kind of put that, Ben?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you can think about it a different ways, and it may sound aggressive and it may not be completely across the board accurate, but I mean that tells me that it's either lack of experience and just he's way too green, or unfortunately, I think it's a lack of respect of time. I don't really know if you can get anything else out of that. I mean, if you're talking to people in a sales role, in a sales capacity, if you're trying to get in front of people, I would argue that the most important thing is to be respectful of the other person's time, because the problem that I have, or let me say it a different way. The result of what just happened with whoever this was is, okay, so he got in front of you a number of times, wasn't able to get your attention. He got your attention once. You said, I've got 5 minutes. He took 7. That very well may end up in you not giving him the time again at all, period, because if you give him 15 minutes the next time, he may take 22. Whereas if someone, if you give them 5 and they take 3, you may be more willing to talk to that person again. And it's the little things, right? And I think on the podcast to a degree, you and I have been kind of not making excuses, but kind of like explaining away behavior of like, oh, it's okay to do this and that. Like, that's one of those things. I mean, respect for another person's time that's one of those things that can make you stand out right away, either good or bad. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and just kind of for some perspective, he does have something that interests me. I'm not sure if I would buy it or not, but it's of interest. But it is kind of like now it's like, yeah, okay. And that at the 5-minute mark, if he'd have said, hey, listen, I know I'm against the clock here. Do you have a few more minutes I need to go? I can respect that, because maybe I just told him I had 5 and I was lying to him, or maybe maybe something canceled. So I can respect the hey. But I would have actually respected, hey, look, it's 5 minutes. I'm even if he's not through his spiel, the fact that he acknowledged the time thing. And that's one thing that, early on in my career, I was not good at. I was not good at saying, hey, give me 15 minutes of your time, and then watching the clock to make sure that 15 minutes was where we were at. I really try to work on that now, because I understand back then, I was younger, a little bit more excited, not really thinking about time management in this, I wasn't my own boss, but I had a lot more freedom than most people had. So I don't think about the constraints of other people and what's going on. And so, and the guy was, very good on his pitch and, very knowledgeable and all those things, but it was a deal. It's like, oh man, I want to set up a call again. I want to talk to him, but will it be 15 minutes turn into 30 and me not get to ask the things that I want to ask either?
Yeah, and to zoom it out, to take it off of that specific example, I mean, I don't know how often it happens to you, but it's way too common in my day-to-day life, where I'll set up an appointment with someone, and the day before or the morning of, they'll say, hey, something came up, sorry, I'm not going to make it. Not going to make it happen. And if,
Yeah.
one time, totally understand that, things come up, it is what it is. But, unfortunately, I've had the experience with some people that, one person will do that 4, 5, 6 times in a row. And at some point it's just like, okay, so, one of us is giving a lot more than the other one. And it, for better or worse, for me at least, it kind of sours the relationship. I mean, if before we even get a chance to interface, you're pushing me off and kind of making it obvious that I'm, a secondary concern, or not important enough really to, that, your calendar is more important than mine in your eyes, that's probably going to rub me the wrong way and make it more difficult for us to have kind of a open communication line on the front end. Do you find yourself kind of falling into those traps?
Yeah, I think one of the things that maybe we should frame this conversation around is because as I hear us talk, I think we have a fear of maybe coming off in a way that we don't want to come off, which is almost this elitist look at us. I think the thing that we're trying to impart is when you're, and I know that's not what you're saying. I'm saying it or me either, but go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say no. It's a back and forth thing.
Right.
I mean, I make sure that that if I put myself on someone else's calendar, unless something like
Right.
aggressive has happened, I'm not going to cancel. And so it works both ways. I'm not. Yeah, I'm certainly
No,
not
no,
saying
no,
like,
no.
hey, in order to get in front of me, you need to be doing
No,
these
no, no.
things, right?
I know, and that's what I'm saying. One thing I think maybe we should reset this kind of reset from the first part to the second part is when you're new to something, you're super excited, or if you love your product or service, you're super excited, and you should be. You should want to tell the world about it. And I think the hard part that Ryan has, is when I want to tell someone about something, I want to just consume their time, because I want them to believe in it like I do. And so I think but then, so those type of people, or if you're in that part of a phase, like if me and you have a new mineral deal and we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a home run. We want to get people on the phone and we want to talk more than 5 minutes because we really want to pitch to them. So that's one phase, right? This phase is when you're maybe a little bit further on down the road. You're a little bit more successful. You have a sense of status. And then all of a sudden, well, it's like, well, if Ben can meet with me, that's great, but I have other things that's important to do. And so it's kind of almost two different career spots in your career, whereas early on, or if you're very excited, something new, you're more likely to consume a lot of time. Whereas what you're describing now is someone who's a little bit more established. They may have a higher value of their time, or self-perceived or not. And so they're not valuing your time. And that's almost, it's equally as bad, but it's almost like it's to kind of set the table here. It's almost like two different spots you could find yourself in. Early on, you could be not consuming people's time because you're so zealous that you overdo it. Whereas later on, you're too lax with time and you're not concerned about people's time as well. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, no, it's, there's no, I don't think there's any right answer, right? I mean, this isn't like this is the right way to do this. And so I think it's just kind of, you got to feel it out. But I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's about just respecting, having a respectful communication both ways, which allows you to, the thing that I always think about is, if I'm already kind of thinking about, this person doesn't value my time, or kind of, what am I doing here? That may, affect my willingness to do a lot more work on the back end on whatever deal they're talking about, or may cause me to be a little bit more hesitant or a little bit more skeptical. I mean, and I think that's kind of human nature, that unless like all the boxes are checked, there may be some just kind of, and like you said, I mean, I may have other things that could be high graded, and if I feel like I'm getting pushed off by somebody, I may subsequently push that deal off to the side.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And
No,
I don't think necessarily that's an experience versus novice thing. I think that's just kind of like a comfort, like a person to person thing. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I guess I know if I know for me personally, if there's just a new project, a new mineral deal, a new business that we're trying to shop around, whatever it is, at that point I'm very excited about it. And because of that, I'm more. Ryan has to. I hate to go in third person, but I don't want to speak for you. I have to watch over talking or consuming too much time. And you see that a lot with a lot of young salespeople as well, just in general, because they are so excited, they're trying to make their way. What I usually see when I'm not concerned with people's time and other people aren't concerned with my time is they're more established, and so they have a little bit better network. They have a little bit more money in their pocket. Usually, you don't see the young salesperson who's hungry blowing you off because that person is trying to close every person he can. It's usually a little bit more older and established. So depending on where you're at when you're hearing this, if you're kind of a young buck out there, your tendency, in my opinion, would be to go too long. Whereas if you're a little bit more established, you might kind of not value. So it's all about time value, right? You're valuing someone else's time early on. You're not valuing it because you're not aware of that you're actually intruding on them. Later on, you're not valuing it because you're actually kind of have a false sense of worth almost. It's like, I can cancel on them, they'll meet. So that's kind of the contrast I'm trying to draw there.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think even one layer above that, if you're, I know I'm not going to comment. Nate is walking around the background. We're not going to. Is he working? Is it? No. Okay. I think when you were talking, what I was thinking about is, if you take that even farther into another layer, I think that someone that's new, sometimes I might even make the argument for someone that's new should be listening a lot more than they're talking, even on sales calls. And to me, what I mean by that is maybe they don't know all the questions to be asking, don't know all the things to be saying. And so I could argue that someone that's new, even though they're super gung-ho and wanting to talk to everybody and wanting to sell, they should probably be talking even less. Whereas if somebody that's a lot more experienced gets on the phone, they might have a lot more context to provide and a lot more details and a lot more just kind of through the flow of talking, have a lot more experience and a lot more things to say and be a lot more long-winded because of that. And so I think to a degree, for the experienced people, it may be even more difficult to be short-winded and get within those 3 minutes, because you feel like you said, you feel like you have so much more to say because you feel like you have so much more value to bring, that at the end of the day, you might be hurting yourself by just over talking.
Yeah, and if you just kind of think about it from, again, let's just kind of maybe think about this from valuing time. If you are the young buck and you are trying to sell something, and you are talking to someone who's been in the industry 10, 15 years, they are probably going to be more in tune with the objections, the problems, why this will work, why this won't work. So would you rather, as a young 22, 23, 24, 25 person, be speaking, or would you rather be hearing the 55, 56, 57-year-old speak and hear what their issues are? Because once you understand those, then the next time you go to the 55, 56, 40, whatever, you can then capitalize on that, because we can, even no matter great your product, your service, your deal package is, until you understand why they don't want to buy it or why they don't want to work with you, you really can't frame, unless you're just super skilled, you're probably not going to frame the pitch the right way. And a lot of times when you're pitching these things, it's not like, we had something the other day we were working on, I can't remember what it was now, and they were asking for a price in under a certain category, and we gave it to them, I think, but we gave it to the wrong category, and like, oh my gosh, that's whoa, we came back, oh no, hold on, sorry. And it was just like one, it was, so I can't remember what it was, but something pretty insignificant as far as the grand scheme of things. But we weren't actually, kind of slight miscommunication there. So when you think about valuing people's time and you valuing your time, there's also something said, the less that you know, the more that you can listen. You're actually getting the most value on your time as well, because you're hearing someone who's fundamentally smarter than you or more knowledgeable than you, or wiser than you talk. And so that's a better ROI on your time too.
So as an example, this past week on, what was it, Wednesday of last week, I went into a pitch meeting on a deal that I'm working on right now. My part in this deal is that I have brought the financing to the table. I brought the money to the table, and we're going to be purchasing an asset. And there's some other plans subsequent to that. Went into the meeting there was 5 of us, and I was walking in with someone else that I'm working on the deal with on my side. And I said to her as we were walking in, I said, my goal here, a successful meeting today, is if I say a couple of words and just smile and nod and listen to everybody else. I don't like, and this is a deal that, in theory, I'm the one running the show. I have a lot of the power in this. I'm going to be once we get to the negotiation table, I'm going to be the one negotiating the deal from A to Z. And so it's not like I'm relinquishing control, but in a lot of scenarios, I'd rather just sit back and let people talk. And because I think you can glean a lot more by listening rather than talking. What's the saying? You can't be listening, learning, and talking all at the same time, or something like that. I mean, and that's
Right.
true.
Right. So on that, I think, I think we talked about the book, Never Split the Difference. If not, everyone who wants to do deals, negotiation, sales, whatever, you should go read it. I think I've done it at least 3 times, maybe 4. I need to go do it again. It's fantastic. One of the things that book really emphasized, and for me that I try to think about now is, and we had something last week where this kind of came up, and we had someone who's kind of frustrated on a project we're working on, and so that, I'm not saying too much, it might give away who the person is, but I was kind of warned going in it might be a difficult situation. And so my mentality was very clear to the people that were in this meeting is, we're going to go in and we're going to say, your job's hard. We know your job's hard. Your bosses are hard on you. You have hard expectations to be met. It's very demanding. Now, the reality is we want to solve this person's problem by offering our service, and we believe that our service can solve it. However, walking in the door and saying, we could solve your problem by hiring us, well, so what? How does that fix when Tom 3 floors up comes down and says this to me? Well, I don't know what that is. I don't know what this is. I have no idea. We sometimes we feel like when we're pitching something that we're especially people like me and you, we're trying to fix problems, we're trying to bring solutions, and we are crafty and we're smart. We can do that on the fly. But if you don't take the time to understand exactly what the issues are, you can miss where things are headed. You can leave a lot of meat on a lot of bones. And I hear a lot of people that will tell me, yeah, I went in there and I told the client this, and this, and they didn't understand. And usually when I hear that, Ben, I hear someone who's not willing to at least fake humility for a few minutes and ask the client, what's going on? The client has bosses too, or they have investors, or they have someone that they're having to deal with. Everyone in the deal has someone they're reporting to. It could be your husband or your wife or your family trust. It doesn't matter. And if you don't take the 30 seconds, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, to sit there and go, okay, what are your concerns? What are your problems? And be sympathetic to them, you're probably not going to get all the information out as if you walk in and say, we can solve your problem by doing this.
I mean, let's be honest, except for a very, very select few examples, there's not a product out there that's actually best in class, that has everything beat, that's across the board better and also the cheapest. I mean, like, and so given that, all the products out there, for lack of, for the majority of them, they're the same. And so what makes the sale? The sale comes from the communication and the relationship, and what you bring to the table that's outside of the actual product itself. I think it's really valuable. I forget who it was. Someone, on LinkedIn that I'm connected with. I forget who it was offhand. A couple of weeks back, put together a video that I really liked, and what he was talking about was one of the sales guys had been trying to go after this account for years and years and years. I've been just beating the door down on this account because it just so happens that this service that they provide, he says that they're like one of the only providers in the space. He knew that this client needed the service, but for some reason just couldn't get it done year after year after year. Eventually, that sales guy leaves, and new sales guy comes in, brand new, had been in the industry for quite some time, but brand new to this firm, brand new relationship. He sits down in front of the client, and an hour and a half later, he comes back to the office, having made the sale, gotten the product done. And so at the end of the day, what had happened was the new rep had sat down and listened to what the problems were, and rather than proposing, hey, here's our top suite of services, here's the most expensive thing we own, here's why you need everything we have, he custom made an exact product to exactly what they needed, what the customer's spec needed, and that was it, because he had the ability to do that, and he got the sale. And so what that tells me is, for years, this one sales guy was going after this account, was just, this is the best we have, you need to buy this, you need to buy this, you need to buy this, and never once took, stepped back and was like, hey, what do you need? Tell me what your needs are. And it seems so basic, but it's something that doesn't happen nearly as much.
So I'm curious how you do this. I'll tell you how I do it, and I'm curious how you do it. So if I'm dealing with a complaint or a sale, either one, it doesn't matter, or an obstacle in a deal, it doesn't really matter to me. I have my internal objective of where I'm trying to get the thing through, and usually that stays the same. So if it's a sale, obviously I'm trying to sell something, or if it's a deal, I'm trying to close a deal. So obviously the goalposts are pretty clear there. If it's a problem, I have a pretty decent idea of what I think the resolution is, but I have to be a little bit more flexible, because I might find out more information about the problem that would change my perspective on that. But one of the things that I really try to focus on is I know where I'm going, and I try to slowly walk from A to Z. And, this is assuming I have 30 minutes, not 5, but if I have for an hour, not 10. And without skipping over steps, without going from A to R, I literally want to go from A to B, but not make it feel that way, right? Not make it feel that way. So sometimes I'll do that where I'll ask a question. Ben, we'll use Ben for a second. Ben talks. Well, Ben already went to C or D, but there's a little bit of meat on B. I need to kind of circle back around, ask a softball question, kind of a yes or no. Get Ben, everything I want to know about the second objective, and then go to C and go to D. But I've tried to refine it where it doesn't feel like I'm actually walking you through a step-by-step process. I try to make it very, very much a natural conversation. And sometimes I do skip steps. I'm not perfect, but what that does is, for me, is that I've been in meetings with salespeople, and a client will throw out a golden goose nugget of information, and they are so nervous, paranoid, caught up, distracted, whatever the right phrase is, that they just whiff on that, because they don't know how to get from A to Z. And you have to do it where it doesn't feel like, hey, Ben, do you want to buy a car? Okay, well, here's the first thing. You have to. It's an art form to kind of craft that. But how do you walk that line where you're going from, what the objective is, you're trying to walk the client through there without making it feel like that, making it feel compassionate, where you're caring, where you are listening and trying to solve problems.
It's a great question. I will be candid. I do think, and I hope this doesn't sound as bad as it sounds in my head before I even say it, but I do think that that's certainly one of my strengths. I think that that's something that I do execute on a really high level pretty consistently. It's really just become second nature to me at this point. But I mean, what you said is completely accurate. I mean, where the success comes for me is when I have such a mastery over the product of, the suite of services, or I have such a mastery over whatever the subject matter is, that I'm able to have just a very kind of nonchalant conversation, very off the cuff, because I'm able to draw on the experience and what have you. And that's not necessarily an industry specific thing. I mean, I'm able to have these conversations across a bunch of different industries that I may or may not have experience in. But I think it comes from, like we've talked about on previous podcasts, I think it's having an idea, having a very good sense of what the goal on the phone call is, and being able to navigate whatever's thrown at you in the call to get there, and asking the right questions. I mean, so it's an experience thing, but being able to ask the softball questions, like you said, so that they don't sound like, okay, so if I want to say, I just make up a bad example. If I want to say, how much money did you make last year? I'm not going to say, how much money did you make last year? I mean, I'm going to try to come around it, so, assuming that the profit margins on that business are this, knowing what I know about the market, you probably, and it's kind of reverse engineering things. And so you don't go directly at it. Right. And so, maybe that was kind of, I kind of go off on a tangent there, but I think the overall sense is being able to come to the conversation with a blank slate, and not have okay, it has to go this way, and after this person says this, I have to ask this question, and after I get this answer, I have to say this, and having like a roadmap, but being able to hear what they have to say and respond in kind and take the conversation organically to where you want to go.
And behind, I agree. The only thing I would add to that is, behind all that has to be the awareness that they have choke points, pain points, difficulties that sometimes they will openly express and sometimes they won't. And trying to sympathize and draw that out without trying to, I mean, because if you're trying to solve the problem, you should be legitimately concerned because you want to solve the problem. But you don't want to sound like a sap, So go ahead.
I'll give you a better example, because I just thought of one. So in one of my previous jobs, I sold the Cutco cutlery for vector marketing. If anybody's listening that's done that, you're probably familiar. That for those of you that have not, Cutco cutlery is a really high quality fine line of kitchen cutlery. It's sold by mostly college students by a company called Vector Marketing that does a lot of the sales. I did that job for quite some time. Got pretty good at it. My closing ratio in the final few years in that position hovered right around 95%. And so most of the appointments I was taking, I was making a sale on. And the way that the training manual is done, so like a brand new rep in training, there's a training manual, and on one of the pages, it has every single knife in one of the sets, and there's a features and benefits page, and you walk through, okay, so this knife is used for this, and it's really good for these things, and you walk through 12 or 15 of those different knives. Now, as a very beginning rep, you're going to open up the manual, you're going to build some rapport and talk to the person, like, hey, how's it going, blah, blah, blah. And then when you get to that page, you're going to walk through and you're going to say what the script says. When I was years in, at the very beginning of the phone call, before even bringing out anything of my presentation, hey, Mrs. Smith, how's it going today? What are some of the things that you like to do in the kitchen? You like to cook chicken? How do you usually do that? Do you usually bake it, or do you usually put it in the grill? Like, how do you usually do that? What kind of vegetables do you?
Hold on, let me cut in. But that's because you listen to people, I've had to guess, over a long period of time, tell you what they do in the kitchen, or why they did want knives, or why they don't want knives, and you were able to build that into your script.
So yes and no. I mean, very much so. But so what ends up happening is, okay, so that when I get to the features and benefits page, and there's all those 12 knives and 15 knives, I already know what knives they want, because they told me what they do in the kitchen. I know the knives well enough to know exactly what knives they want. And so I can tailor the rest of my entire presentation on, okay, so based on what you told me, I think this set would be perfect, and walk them through, because then it's just a consultation of, you told me exactly what you do in the kitchen. You told me what you're looking for. Here it is, as opposed to, okay, this is just a generic presentation. Here are the 12 knives. Do you want this set? Do you want this one? Do you want this one? I don't really know what you like. Hey, you might be vegetarian. You might cook soup 7 days a week. You may never cook in your entire life. You may not own a knife. I wouldn't know any of those things unless I'm having the conversation and preloading that information. So that's kind of maybe a more specific example of what I'm talking about.
No, and I think maybe we can tie this all together now. So if we go back to the beginning, young, excited salespeople, they come in, they've got a lot of information to tell you. Here's the knives. Let me read the script. Bop, 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 bop. As you progress, if you reverse engineer that process, you say, you know what, instead of me just spilling out information, let me learn how to fact find, let me learn how to mine information and build that database. Whereas when you go into new meetings, you understand the way to ask an open or a closed-ended question, or how to softball something up and to get them to start talking about the things. In this case, it's chicken and knives, but whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But you had to, you could have, so day one, you could have walked in Cutco Knives. You could have asked those questions. Probably wouldn't know the knives well enough to kind of walk them through the process. But it would have been better than going in and just reading all the knife scripts, because at least you'd have started building that database. And so if you get to a point where you're constantly taking the 7 minutes instead of the 5, then I think my observation would be is that you're not doing a good enough job of bringing in that information. Our customers, depending on what market I'm dealing with, usually have the same set of questions. And so I've kind of developed a handful of answers for those questions. And I've even learned that they will ask those questions in really weird ways. Like, they'll ask a question that actually, if you were sitting there, Ben, you wouldn't understand. You would think they're asking something else, because they don't actually know how to communicate that to me. It's kind of weird, but it doesn't happen always, but it does happen sometimes. But I've heard it so much, I kind of know, okay, when they're asking this, they're actually wanting me to go over here and answer this question. But it takes a lot of time and energy practice. I ain't saying I got it down. I ain't saying I'm perfect at it, but it is interesting to hear you use that Cutco analogy, because that's right. The more people you talk to, the more you listen, the better data you got. And then you start learning to ask, Grandma Betty, what do you do in the kitchen? And she probably gets excited, probably gets giddy. Oh my gosh, I bake pies and I do this. And well, here you go, building out a closing script already.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so on an appointment, if I'm talking to a woman and or a couple, whatever, and we're in the kitchen and we're talking about some of the knives, and rather than me like talk about what they're doing, if she's like grabbing the knife or he's grabbing the knife out of my hand to use it to cut something on the counter, like, I have a sale. Like, it's
Right.
a done deal, right?
Right.
And so if you can get people involved and get people bought in, and so it doesn't really matter what product you're selling. The reason I kind of backpedaled on what we were talking about before is because I think that when you and I start talking about things, it's a little bit more different because you and I are generally talking about like more concepts as opposed to like a tangible product. Or we're talking about facilitating a connection or networking, as opposed to like, here, buy this $500 piece of thing. Right. But if you're selling a product, or if you have a service, if you have something tangible, I think step one, and honestly, you, Ryan, I don't know if we even said this on the podcast, and we're 11 episodes in. If we haven't, that's probably a massive oversight on both of our parts. I think step one in this process is having an absolute frontwards and backwards mastery of whatever you're selling, knowing exactly what it does, why it does it, why it's made the way it is, having a backwards and forwards knowledge of what it is that you're providing and why you're providing it, because that way not only can you talk intelligently about what you're providing, but you can also talk about intelligently about what's going on in the market, why you may be better than your competitors, and you can kind of give a more full picture. But I don't think you can do really any of those things. I think step one is product mastery, and I think everything else is subsequent, because I don't think you can get there without that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I
think
think
kind of shaking your head a little bit, but
no. Yeah, I wouldn't. I was agreeing. I think it depends. So I obviously, yes. I think it's going to depend on, for instance, and I didn't do the knife thing, so I'm curious kind of your feedback on here. When you're selling the knives, I don't even know how they measure knife strength or what the right terms is, or blade hardness. I don't know any of that. I think there's one thing to know what a blade's hardness is, and how they measure that, versus being able to communicate that the blade will last 3 years or whatever, right? And I know that's part of what you're saying, but I just kind of want to make sure that we're parsing this out. It's one thing to have the knowledge of what the manual says, but there's also the ability to communicate that clearly. And so it goes both. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think those are inextricably linked. I think that if you're talking about the features and benefits, you have to be able to talk about length of life of product, right? And that's
sure. I'm not a Cutco knife guy, so it's kind of hard for me to.
Oh no, I just mean in general. Like, I'm cut off anything. If you're talking about like a drill bit tool, you got to be able to say like, hey, this is going to be able to drill one well or 50.
Here's why I'm kind of cautious to go all in with you, mainly because one of the things I've noticed through doing the podcast is everyone reads the news differently, and they all read it from a perspective, especially oil and gas news, of how it pertains to them and their business. And so if you hear someone on the news and they are talking about, the price of oil went up, 2% or a buck or $3, that's very relevant information for a trader and why it went up. But for a guy on the rig, it's probably not really relevant. And like Mark LaCour was saying the other day, if you start reading the 10Ks, just kind of breaking down what level you're hitting. So understanding the information is great. Being able to disseminate that to the proper audience sometimes takes a little bit more effort because you can't give out the exact same fact to every person that you come across, because everyone's, if you're dealing with like we talked about with Tim the other day, if you're dealing with a bank, how you present that information will be a little bit different than you do with a landowner. You see what I'm trying to get at there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I still I still argue. I would still argue. I think that it all comes back to the product, right? Because you can't. How can you intelligently have a conversation about your target market or your competition or your value add or any of those other things unless you have a base knowledge in the product, right?
Okay, so yeah, maybe we were talking past each other. We try it like this. I'm holding up a big old bottle of Smart Water here. I can literally, well, I say literally, it doesn't have the okay, it has the ingredients on here. I could read off the ingredients to you. I could memorize the ingredients. Okay. But that doesn't mean I could communicate to a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old why those ingredients are important. And so what you're saying is probably is a very well-rounded understanding. The pushback maybe I'm giving is sometimes it's not just the mere facts. It's the facts and then the presentation of the facts. And so sometimes you see messaging that is very factual, but it's not presented to the right audience in the right way. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, no, to be clear, I wasn't necessarily just talking about like the technical specs of a product. I was talking about how it fits into the overall picture and all those other things. So like going back to the knife example, okay, so it's made out of this kind of steel and the handle is made out of this, but at the end of the day, like the client doesn't really care about those. Like it's important that it's made well, but that like it doesn't matter whether it's made out of this stainless steel or this stainless steel. But the key being, if I can tie that back into, okay, well, it's made from this kind of stainless steel because it lasts a lot longer, and it's also made out of that because it's a lot stronger and can be sharpened more easily, or like what have you, right? And so,
but if you go to an engineer's house, he may actually want the technical specs of it, whereas Grandma Betty just wants to know it's going to cut a million potatoes for, right? It's the same information, it's just packaged differently.
And so that's exactly why I say it's important to have the product mastery, because to the engineer, you can say, it's 440A grade, highest grade stainless steel. To the the gardener Betty, you can say this is going to cut your rose bushes for the next 30 years and you won't have to worry about it. And so you can talk, but you wouldn't be able to have those conversations to those two people unless you had a core basic knowledge of the product. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I think so. We're probably saying the same thing. We're probably saying it differently. And I'm saying don't know all the technical specs and not be able to communicate how that actually works to someone who's not technical. Because you could say, "Well, I've mastered the product. I know all the technical." Well, right, but for a guy like me, I don't know. I don't care about the technical specs, right?
To be clear, what I was saying was both. But you're absolutely right. I mean, like in other words, when I'm saying product mastery, I'm talking about both technical and application in the real world. Right. Those are together.
I knew you meant that. I was clarifying to make sure that was clear for everyone else, because you're a master, you're a Jedi, you are a wizard. You have never not closed a deal. I'm surprised there's only 94% close rate. I didn't know you haven't closed a deal that you tried. You make 100% of the shots you take. I mean, I didn't know. Like, this is dun, 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 breaking news. Ben Samuels did not close a deal somewhere, somehow. I don't know how. It was impressive. Like, we learned, that's what we learned today, that you missed the deal somewhere, allegedly. I think you're being humble and you're acting like you only closed 94 to 95%. I'm assuming that, because I've never, I don't want to lie here now. Wait, have I seen you actually close a deal? Let me backtrack now that I think about it.
Ouch.
Oh, too soon.
I closed one, but you were in that one, so I don't know if I get credit for that one.
That would be the one you close, the one I'm not in.
I mean, yeah, it's by design. From if you'd get Nate to schedule their guests on the right days, that probably wouldn't happen again.
Wow, why is this my fault? Why is this my fault?
I don't know who's the name on the bottom left hand corner of his paychecks. Sorry, bottom right hand corner of his paychecks.
He's getting paid? Wait, hold on. Hold on. Whoa, that changes everything here. That changes everything. Oh, man. Well, now let's kind of recap a few things. So first off, time, valuing time. There's several ways to look at it. One, don't take too much of someone's time, especially if you ask for a certain amount of time. And most calls today are set via conference call or the early pitch of, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Two, even when you are asking of time, be sure that you don't need to be listening more than talking, because a lot of times, again, excitement.
You should always be listening more than talking.
I've been trying to tell you that for like 6 months, man, and you just keep top. Anyways, so you listen. Listen. Just listen. See, there you go. You're talking again. I don't make your mind up. You want to talk or you? No, I'm not talking. I'm gonna sit here. This would be great podcasting. I'm listening now.
All right. In that case, I've got a request. So for next episode going forward, can we have little like timers, like timer counters in the corner of when we talk, and like have just a running count? Because if I'm the one talking a line share at the time, like you and I have a problem, because I think that we might disagree a little bit on that. I think a little bit. No.
Are you saying that you want to see who talks the most? But we have to cut out the intro, because that's my deal, and the outro, and the witty banter, because you can't banter. So I've got to carry us there. Valuable content. I guess you do say something every few episodes. When you contribute value content, we'll count that versus. Yeah, I mean, God, I do dominate in that case.
Can we do this Chick-fil-A thing tomorrow? Can we just get this out of the way? Can we do it, please?
Okay.
I feel like you need to be put in your place. I don't know. I feel like you might need a little I don't know, a little correction here. I don't know.
Okay. Let's value people's time, and let's wrap it up by this. A couple things. One, when you ask for time, be sure that you keep to that time. Two, when you ask for time, also make sure that you're not talking the whole time. If it's possible, learn stuff, ask stuff, get information. Three, as you progress in your career, remember how much you wanted someone else's time. And so don't start canceling, rescheduling. Listen, life happens. It's not perfect, but try not to be that person who is constantly rescheduling, especially on a first date, first visit, first meeting type situation. Final thing is, when you're valuing someone's time, the best thing you can do is have a product mastery, understanding of what it is that you're talking about, being able to answer all the questions you possibly can, and communicate in the level of detail that they need it to be communicated. All those things are time management and time valuations of your time and everyone else's. And I think they're stuff that if we're not careful, we can all overlook.
Well said, sir. Well said. Appreciate the time.
I appreciate your time. No, I appreciate your time. It's valuable. It's valuable. So, listeners, we won't bore you with any more Ben's whining about not getting enough time on the podcast. I will be back next week. Ben will be back. We should have 2 guests next week, but Nate's in charge, so who knows? And with that being said, we'll talk to you next week.